So on yesterday, we started off with the basics of completing the square, which is the combination of factoring with square roots. So we did an example in which the problem was already set up for us to factor and then solve by square roots. Of course, every problem is not going to work out that way. That's where completing the square comes into play. When you complete the square, divide by the a value, identify the b value because that's the important part of the process. Take half of the b value, square it, add it to the end of the original problem, and factor using MAF. So on yesterday, we did 4 examples of just doing the process of completing the square. That process makes up half of the steps for solving the actual equation, which is what we're going to do today. So, as you can see, as it's listed, there are 7 steps, although most of them are pretty simple steps. I just broke it up part by part. So we're going to go through each step systematically with example number 1. Again, for some of you, it will take you less time to solve it than others, but we're going to go through it step by step so that we can be on the same page. Again, please ask questions as you have them, because I can't read your mind and close mouth don't get that. So, step 1 is to add or subtract the constant term to the other side of the equation. For completing the square, you do not want equation equal to 0, unless there is absolutely no other choice. With completing the square, you want the variables on one side and you want a number on the other. The key thing here is you want the variables on one side of the equation. So if you look at example 1, x squared minus 10x equals 24. The variables are on one side and you have a number on the other. So we're set and ready to go. Step 2, divide both sides by the a value, if there is one. So, a is equal to 1, but if I divide everything by 1, nothing changes, so we're good to go. Step 3, take half the b value and square it. Take half the b value and square it. So b is equal to negative 10. So we need to take half of the b value and square it. So that's simple enough to take care of. Negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. Negative 5 squared is 25. Step 4. Add the squared value to both sides of the equation. So here's the equation that you started with. X squared minus 10x equals 24. You're going to take your squared value and add it to both sides. Here's why you're adding it to both sides. Number 1, the left-hand side is now going to become a perfect square, which you'll see in a second. Number 2, you can't add something to one side of the equation and not do it to the other. If you're going to do it to one side, you better do it to the other side. That's basic fundamental rule of solving an equation. Any questions before we continue? completing the square does require you to use a little bit of focus. Don't try to rush through the problem until you get good with it. Step 5. Factor the left-hand side of the equation using MAF. Simplify the right-hand side. So if I MAF the left-hand side, that's x minus 5 and x minus 5, which becomes x minus 5 squared. 24 plus 25, 49. So now we're set up and ready to go. Step 6, take the square root of both sides. Square and a square root drops out. So x minus 5 equals plus or minus 7. And solve the remaining equation. So x equals 5 plus or minus 7. Now, both of those are whole numbers, so you cannot leave this as the final answer. You can't leave that as the final answer. Since they're whole numbers, you simplify it all the way. So that means one of your answers is 5 plus 7, which is 12. One of your answers is 5 minus 7, which is negative 2. That's the end of the problem. So, if you leave it like that, that's going to get marked wrong. If you leave it like that, it's going to get marked wrong. The only time you can leave it like that is if you have square roots or if you have imaginary numbers. If they're whole numbers, you need to simplify them. Questions, example 1. Yeah, even if it's the smallest thing that you understand, make sure you speak it. Because after Wednesday, I won't see you Monday. I won't see you until Monday. Alright? Not seeing or hearing you, so let's do example number 2. So, example 2, we're following the exact same steps. Following all the same steps. So step 1, add or subtract the constant term to the other side of the equation. So you want variables on one side, number on the other. We already have that. We're good to go. Second step is divide by the a value. Well, a is equal to 3. That means everything gets divided by 3. Everything's getting divided by 3. So we have x squared plus 2x equals negative 3. Now, unlike yesterday, we don't have to put the 3 back in front because we did it to both sides of an equation. So the 3 does not have to go in front. If anything, if you put the 3 in front, you're going to make the problem harder than what it is. So the A value is taken care of. Now we can use our B value. B is equal to 2. Take half the B value and square it. So that's 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 squared is 1. So 1 is the number you're going to add to both sides. Any questions before we continue? All right. Left-hand side gets factored. We're on step number 5. Factor the left-hand side and simplify the right-hand side. So if you factor the left-hand side, that's x plus 1, x plus 1, and x plus 1 equals negative 2, x plus 1 squared. So you have to know how to factor in that step. If you're still struggling with factoring, now it's time to come get the extra help, because you're going to get exposed in this problem. Once you finish factoring, square. Square and a square root drops. So it's x plus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 2i. Remember, you take the square root of the negative number, put the I behind it. Then subtract 1, so your answer is x equals negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 2i. So remember, with complex numbers, it has to be in standard form. This is in standard form. If you wrote the answer as x equals plus or minus square root of 2i minus 1, that's wrong. That's not in standard form. It's not in standard form. Questions on example 2? Again, it seems harder than what it is. You just have to pay attention to the steps and what you're doing with those steps. All right, example 3. So example 3, I'm going to start it off and then give you a chance to work a little bit through it. So, example 3. You've got 2x squared plus 24x minus 90 equals 0. So remember, when you're completing the square, you want to start with variables on one side equal to a number on the other side. So you've got our variables, but negative 90 has to move to the other side. We want the number that doesn't have a variable attached to it on the other side. So we can easily move that and add it over. So that's how you want to start it when you're completing the square. But now all the other steps are similar to what we've already done. So let me pause my recorder for a second. Let's start navigating our way through it. So we already moved the constant term over. Your a value is 2. So everything is divided by 2. X squared plus 12x equals 45. Now we work with the b value. Take half the b value and then square it. 12 divided by 2 squared. 6 squared is 36. That's the number you're adding to both sides. So that's how the problem should look before you get ready to factor. Back to the left-hand side. X plus 6 and x plus 6. X plus 6 squared. Simplify the right-hand side. That's 81. Any questions before we continue? Alright, let's finish it off. Take the square root of both sides. X plus 6 equals plus or minus 9. And then we solve the equation. X equals negative 6 plus or minus 9. Remember, you can't leave your answer that way. So one of your answers, negative 6 plus 9 is 3. Negative 6 minus 9, negative 15. That's that problem over. Questions with example 3. Alright. And the last example that's up there, it's a bonus example. It's not written in the notes page. I made another one up just to show you how to work completing the square when you encounter decimals. because decimals can and certainly will happen from time to time. So, there are certain steps that don't change. You still need the constant on the other side. So, negative 16 has to move. 4x squared plus 20x equals 16. So that part has to move. A value is 4, so everything gets divided by 4. X squared plus 5x equals 4. So far nothing's changed. We work with the b value. B equals 5. Take half the middle term and square it. That's 5 divided by 2 squared. That's 2.5 squared, which is 6.25. Again, it's okay for you to work with the fraction. It's okay to work with the decimal as long as the decimal comes out to be something that's nice and neat. If it doesn't come out nice and neat, then you're going to have to work with a fraction. So far, none of our steps have changed. 6.25, add it to both sides. So the next step in this would be to factor the left-hand side. So, I wouldn't want to factor that, because with that decimal sitting there. However, there was a formula that was given to us yesterday for completing the square. So recall that if you have x squared plus bx, and you're trying to complete the square, it becomes x plus b over 2 squared. That's completing the square formula. And this really helps us when we're dealing with decimals. Or fractions for that matter. Now, if you want to factor that, be my guest. But since I know that b is equal to 5, 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. So that's how it would be rewritten. So if you ask where I got 2.5 from, b is equal to 5. So if I put b into the formula, 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. That's where it came from. So now we can finish the problem. Take the square root. So on the left-hand side, you have x plus 2.5 equal to plus or minus. My calculator do a little bit of work. You take the square root of 10.25, you're going to get a nice long decimal. So we're going to round that to 3.20. I would go to 2 decimal places, that's perfectly fine. So x is equal to negative 2.5 plus or minus 3.20. So your 2 answers Negative 2.5 plus 3.20 is 0.7. Negative 2.5 minus 3.20. Negative 5.7. So there's your two answers. So the process is still the same, you just had to deal with a decimal. So that takes care of solving an equation by completing the square. The last part with completing the square is how to change something from standard form to vertex form, which is what we'll do tomorrow.